A Winter Wedding in Pajaro Bay by Barbara Cooley. December 21st, 9:15 a.m. The wedding is off, Hector. Rain Archer looked across the counter of her little herbal shop at the man she loved. He stared back at her uncomprehendingly. But Rainbow, I love you. She tried not to blubber and make a fool of herself. We'll get married someday. Maybe. But not today. It can't be today. But why? He stood there, soaking wet in his tie-dyed t-shirt and ripped jeans, his shaggy black hair having been knocked loose from its usual ponytail by the storm he'd just walked through to get to her shop. Because of the storm, she said. It's not just here on the coast, it's everywhere. She looked down at her phone with its ridiculously cheerful weather app. Prancing kittens carrying umbrellas danced across the screen to tell her there was a 100% chance of rain for the next 5 days straight. Her news app was even worse, with its screaming headlines about downed trees and power lines from here to Las Vegas. The road out of town is closed, Hector. We're stuck here. I know, he said. Those wide, guileless brown eyes stared back at her. But we'll just get married when it opens again. We agreed to elope to Vegas. I don't know why you're crying. You don't understand. She was really trying not to be a hysterical bridezilla about this, but he really didn't get it. He knew all she'd ever wanted for her wedding day was to get married on the winter solstice, the shortest and most sacred day of the year. Didn't he understand what it meant to her? That was her fantasy wedding. Unlike her college friends who'd all gotten married in over-the-top designer gowns dripping with satin and Swarovski crystals. They'd topped off their ceremonies with meticulously planned receptions and ballrooms, with coordinated color schemes and matching forks for the 7-course meals. She'd always walked her own path through life, and she had believed for years that she would get married in the middle of a fairy ring in a redwood forest, with the sun beaming down on the winter woods, surrounded by the glory of nature. We'll get married some other day, he mumbled. Her heart broke at the sight of him. She knew others thought of Hector as strange, even a bit loopy, but she saw his true nature. He was good, and kind, and filled with joy toward life. He didn't have a mean bone in his body, and his heart was the purest she'd ever known. She had recognized he was the man for her the very first time she'd seen him. But he didn't understand how she felt, and she was at her wits' end trying to explain to him why it mattered. She had compromised on everything. No fairy ring in the redwoods, no special vows written by them to express their unique view of the world, no chance to celebrate their love surrounded by their friends out in the beauty of nature. She had agreed to drive to Vegas and have a quickie wedding instead. It didn't matter, she'd told herself. The marriage was what mattered, not the perfectly planned wedding. So they'd agreed to marry on the winter solstice, but in a kitschy chapel in Vegas with an Elvis impersonator officiating. It would be fun, and they'd have memories to laugh about for years, and then they'd be married and live happily ever after. But now, faced with giving up the one, final part of her long-held dream, it was just too much. It's the winter solstice today, Hector. But it's just another day, he said. You just don't understand. He shook his head, those wide, innocent eyes filled with pain at her suffering. But I love you, Rain. Go, just leave me alone. He tried to come around the counter, but she turned away. I need my space right now, Hector, just go. Father Anselm found Hector Peña crying in the nave of the old mission church. After a night of storms, the rain had eased up to mere sprinkles that pattered lightly against the stained glass. The morning light was brighter now that the clouds had thinned, and a weak glow seeped through the stained glass to wash the colors across the ancient tile floor of the church. Hector sat, head bent to rest against the oak pew in front of him, sobbing like his world had ended. What is it, my son? Hector cried on, inconsolable. She doesn't want to get married, Padre Dude. I can't make her happy. Oh, Hector, I'm so sorry. Anselm found Hector to be one of the more challenging members of his flock. But the perpetually stoned old surfer's spirit was filled with compassion for others, and that counted for a lot. What makes you think she doesn't want to get married? She said so, Hector moaned. She said this? She said she wanted to get married today because it's a special day for her. The winter solstice, yes. The woman Hector loved was a Wiccan who had changed her given name to Rainbow, and this was a bit hard for some of the older members of the congregation to accept, even in a California coastal village where such things were hardly unheard of. Many of them seemed to look to their parish priest to pass judgment on Hector's choice of mate. But Anselm knew that the Lord moved in mysterious ways, and Hector was one of God's most unfathomable creations. This was not the first time people of different faiths married each other, and wouldn't be the last. If this woman had found space in her heart to love Hector Peña with all his oddness and all his faults, her way of celebrating that love was not something he would question. So he sat next to Hector, and they talked for a while, about how one needed to be patient with those we love, about how essential it was to enter the sanctity of marriage with an attitude of sobriety and faith, and about how no man had ever fully understood a woman in the history of the world. But this eternal conundrum could best be dealt with by listening to them, treating their feelings with respect, and by not jumping to conclusions. It was a long talk. Rain stared up at the little skylight in the roof over her shop. There was the tiniest patch of blue showing as the clouds drifted across, but it wouldn't be enough. The latest news was that the road closure would continue through tomorrow, and all non-emergency vehicles were being turned back at the summit if they tried to cross the coastal hills out of town. It didn't matter anymore. It was too late to get married today. The fates clearly had other plans for her. The wedding just wasn't meant to be. She thought back to the wedding she'd first dreamed of, long before she'd even met Hector. She'd once visited a fairy ring, a special place tucked in an ancient redwood forest 100 miles up the coast from here. She had never forgotten the sudden sense of calm and peace she'd felt when she'd stepped into the circle. A fairy ring was a natural phenomenon, created when a giant redwood died. A ring of saplings grew around the dead tree, taking nourishment from its decomposing form. In some rare cases, the saplings formed a perfect circle along the former drip line of the mother tree. And in the center, as the old tree either decomposed or was harvested, a little clearing emerged. The center of the ring she'd seen that winter day had been filled with milkweed. Monarch butterflies flitted from one flower to the next, and the rays of the sun glittered through the sweeping branches of the circling trees. It was a place of holiness, of joy, of the glory of nature at its most magical. And she'd been struck, all those years ago, by the thought that this would be the place she would marry. A fairy ring. The bell on the shop door jingled, and she looked up. "I heard you're looking for a fairy ring." The young woman was tall and slender, with curly dark hair and vivid emerald green eyes. "You must be a madrigal," Rain said, recognizing the family traits, the physical type, and the unwavering confidence that came with being a member of the oldest and most powerful family in the village. "Windy Madrigal," the woman said, shaking her hand. "You're related to the mayor?" She laughed. "He's my big brother." "So, would you like to buy something? Some Christmas presents, maybe? I have some really nice bath salts already gift-boxed." Windy shook her head. "No. Ooh, wait a minute. Those sound good. No, no." She shook herself free of the temptation of the bath salts. "That's not why I'm here. I'm here because you need a fairy ring." Rain didn't realize she'd been talking aloud while she reminisced about that long-ago forest. This woman must think she's nuts. "I was just daydreaming. Sorry." She started to set the different scents of bath salts out on the counter for Windy to look at. But she was interrupted. "We don't have time for that now. I'll have to come back and look at them some other day. We need to arrange things." "What are you talking about?" "The fairy ring," she said impatiently. "I heard through the grapevine you need a fairy ring. Today." Rain was dumbfounded. The Pajaro Bay grapevine was notorious, But even for it, this was a bit much. But how do you know? Windy raised one hand. Don't even ask. It'll take too long to explain. But I was just thinking about it now. How could anyone possibly know? Hector's been talking to Father Anselm. Oh. Rain sat back on her stool. Father Anselm would surely be telling Hector how wrong she was, how silly her ideas were, and the priest would be hard at work driving a wedge between them. So, do you want to know where there's a fairy ring on Madrigal Land? Windy punctuated this with a wink. Why would I want to know? Rain said, getting annoyed at being mocked by her. The wedding's off, for now anyway. That's not the way I heard it, Windy said. Again, she put up a hand when Rain started to question it. Go with the flow, Ms. Archer. You want to hear about the ring? Rain shrugged. Knock yourself out. Okay. Windy pulled out a map that looked as old as the Madrigal family, which dated back centuries in this area. She spread out the map on the counter. It's about a mile up this Forest Service road. When you get to the waterfall, you turn right. Here. She pointed to a spot on the map. Then you have to only walk about 50 feet or so on the path and ta-da, there it is. It's the most perfect circle ever. Rain had seen the most perfect fairy ring all those years ago. But it didn't matter. The center tree is long gone, Windy continued, undeterred by Rain's lack of enthusiasm. But the baby trees around are all about 50 feet tall now, and they form a perfect circle with a meadow right in the center of it. So, you want to use it? For what? For your wedding. Today. Rain shook her head. I'm not getting married today. Right, Windy said. She rolled up the map, put a rubber band around it, and set it on the counter. I'll leave this here, though, just in case. There's just one condition. What's that? I get to come to the wedding. Rain shrugged. Okay, I promise. If we have a wedding at your fairy ring someday, you can come. I'll tell my brother and sister-in-law. I'm sure they'll want to come too. And then you can use our barn for the reception. You don't want the wedding cake to get wet if it starts raining again, so the reception should be inside. Sure. Sounds reasonable, Rain said. Don't you think you're getting a little ahead of yourself? Windy glanced behind her, out the shop door. Only by about 2 minutes. See ya. She headed out, leaving Rain sitting on the stool, staring at the rolled-up map, and wondering if all the madrigals were as strange as the one she'd just met. It was exactly 2 minutes later when an elegantly dressed and very elderly woman swept in the door to the shop. Swept in was the only way to describe it. She entered like she was walking onto a Broadway stage, head held high, wearing a meticulous rust-colored suit that miraculously hadn't a speck of rain on it, and showing a fire in her eyes that would silence a heckler in the front row with one glance. A quiet little man trailed behind her, shutting the door to keep out the wind. He closed the umbrella he was carrying, folded his hands around the handle, rested the tip on the floor like a cane, and stood silently just inside the door, like the consigliere of a mafia don keeping watch. And the woman was Pajaro Bay's equivalent of a mafia don. Ms. Zelda Potter, I presume? Rain said. My reputation precedes me, apparently, she said. Yes, Rain said. That and the endless reruns on the classic movie channel. Zelda laughed. Those old things. I can't believe you recognized me from those. It's been 50 years, my dear. You couldn't be mistaken for anyone else. I'll take that as a compliment. Now, down to business. Business? I understand you and our Hector are getting married today. Rain sighed. You understand wrong, no matter what the Pajaro Bay grapevine says. One impeccable eyebrow was raised, and Rain had to force herself not to cower in response. Why is that? Rain looked up at the skylight. Don't you see? Nature itself is keeping us from getting married. It's as if the universe is sending us a message that this isn't supposed to happen." "Nonsense," Ms. Potter said crisply. "Are you mocking my beliefs, Ms. Potter?" "No, I'm not. I said nonsense, and I meant it. You and Hector love each other, don't you?" "Yes." "Then the universe has no interest in keeping you apart. There's a shortage of true love in the world as it is, and the universe has better things to do than keep people who love each other from being together. Carpe diem, young lady. Seize the day, this day, the winter solstice. It's your day. Take it and tell the universe who's boss." "But we can't get to Vegas." "So get married here. Now. Today. I can't see how we can pull it off. We don't have anywhere to go or someone to officiate. Any of that." "I think Father Anselm would be willing to officiate." "No offense, Ms. Potter, but while I'm sure Hector wouldn't mind, the church used to burn people like me at the stake. As an outspoken old woman, I would have been on the next stake over, my dear, so I can sympathize. But I think you'll find he's not quite as terrible as you imagine him to be. In fact," she added dryly, "I don't believe the Padre has participated in any witch burnings in at least a week." Rain had to laugh at that. "Fair enough. But it's just not my cup of tea, let's say." "I guess that. Sandy?" Her silent assistant handed her an envelope. She opened it and removed a lovely calligraphed certificate from it. "I once used a mail order service to become a licensed minister so I could marry 2 dear friends of mine." The glance she gave Rain told volumes. "A story for another day. But in any case, I happened to pull out the certificate when I heard of your dilemma, and I don't see any expiration date on it." "But," she smiled at Rain, "they used to call me One-Take Potter. I can memorize anything and get it right the first time. So, I think, young lady, the universe isn't quite as cantankerous as you thought, unless you don't want me to be your officiant." Rain imagined future wedding photos of the movie star Zelda Potter in bright red galoshes and holding an umbrella while reciting the wedding vows. "I think it would be lovely, ma'am." Then she shook her head, trying to change gears from grief to excitement. "I guess I'd better call Windy Madrigal and tell her I'll take her up on the offer of her fairy ring." "No need. I'm sure she's already clearing the barn for the reception as we speak." "But—" Zelda Potter picked up her certificate, handed it to Sandy, turned on her heel, and went through the door he opened in front of her. "Have faith, Rainbow Archer!" she called out from the alley, in the inimitable voice that would carry all the way to the theater cheap seats. "The universe may not care, but Pajaro Bay will find a way to pull this off." An hour later, Rain was beginning to think she'd imagined the whole thing. She looked up at the skylight. The sun wasn't out, but the sky was clearing. This couldn't be happening, could it? This couldn't actually be her wedding day? "Have faith," Zelda Potter had said. She didn't believe it could all work out, though. It was hard to have faith when she was alone in a town full of strangers, and no one knew or cared about her here. So she decided to distract herself by making a batch of potpourri, using the most calming herbs and flowers in the shop. She worked on it for a while, wondering why Hector hadn't answered her calls. He had an old flip phone, since technology was really not his thing. But it did have voicemail, and he should be getting her messages. But there hadn't been a peep out of him. She didn't have anyone else in town to call, since she hardly knew anyone here. She had been living here for 4 months, but still felt very much like an outsider in this cliquey little village. Was this whole thing a big practical joke on her? She turned back to her work to calm herself. Chamomile, green tea, and lavender had gone into the bowl so far. It smelled wonderful. It needed a touch more purple, she thought. Verbena. It would add color without altering the scent she'd already created. She grabbed the glass jar with its purple flowers and added a generous dash to the mix. It was just right. She began to scoop the mixture into small fabric bags, perfect for tucking into a pocket or setting on a bathroom counter. She'd name the mixture Stormy Serenity, she decided. She sure needed some serenity on this stormy day. There was a knock on the shop door. "Come in," Rain called out, pausing in the work of filling the bags. The door opened, and little Marisol Serrano poked her head in. "What are you doing, Miss Rain?" Marisol asked. She was one of the children Rain had met back at Halloween. On that night, the little girl had been dressed in a glittery ball gown. Now she wore an orange raincoat and galoshes. "I'm making potpourri," she said. "It's to make the place smell good." "It always smells good here," Marisol said. "And why are you out on this stormy day? Shouldn't you be in school?" Rain asked her. "Daddy pulled us out to go gathering," she said, looking out the door. "Hi, Miss Rain," said Oliver Knight. The boy looked behind him, just as Marisol had done. "Hi there," said Rhea O'Keefe, coming in a few seconds later. "I see," Rain said. "It's my 3 visitors from Halloween. How are you all doing?" "Very well, thank you," said Rhea. Deputy Serrano, Marisol's father, came last, pulling a big red wagon loaded down. "Is this going to be enough?" he asked. "Enough what?" she asked, standing up to peer over the counter. The wagon was filled with umbrellas, in all colors and sizes. "Where did you get all those?" "We knocked on all the doors," Oliver said. "Everyone gave them for the wedding." She sat back on her stool. "Everyone did? Wow." "The whole town. We've been down all the streets," Rhea said. "My feet are tired." "Do you think we'll need more?" Deputy Serrano asked. "We weren't sure how many to borrow." Rain shook her head. "I have no idea who's coming, so who knows?" He smiled at her. "We'd better look for more, then. We'll leave this batch here, and the Madrigal farm truck will be by to take them up to the fairy ring later." He started to gather the kids and go, but she called out, "Wait!" He stopped and looked back at her. "Why are you doing this?" He smiled at her. "Because Hector's a good person. Because you're alone here without family to help you pull this off. Because this is Pajaro Bay." He turned to the children. "Let's go, kids. We've got more doors to knock on." They left. A pair of women were the next to arrive. "Hi," said a gorgeous woman dressed in a black cashmere sweater that set off her coppery skin tone. "I'm Robin Brenham, from Robin's Nest Realty in the next alley over." "And I'm Camilla Knight," said a redhead in a pink sweatshirt and jeans. "From Stormy Night Accounting. But we met on Halloween when you—" Her voice broke there. "When you and Hector saved my son and the other children." "Hector did it," Rain said. "All I did was tell you where to find them." Camilla cleared her throat. "You did more than you can imagine. And I'm sorry we didn't stop by to introduce ourselves properly after that. We figured we'd meet you at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, but you haven't been coming to them. We should have reached out." "I'm just running a tiny herb shop. I don't picture myself as the Chamber of Commerce type." The women laughed. Robin explained. "Chamber of Commerce meetings are our monthly excuse to get together and eat pizza and talk about how bad business is during the off-season when all the tourists are gone." Rain found herself laughing too. "I pictured guys in suits and ties talking about quarterly reports. I wouldn't fit in." "There's one guy who usually wears a suit and tie, but he owns the surf shop," Camilla said. "Please come next time. We each order a different type of pizza and share the slices, so the more who come, the more varieties we get to try." Robin nudged Camilla then, and they both turned serious. "So," Camilla said, "tell us about flowers." "Flowers?" Rain looked around her shop. "Well, I have a lot of dried flowers. Lavender over here, some lemon verbena, and—" "No, we meant flowers for the wedding," Robin said. She held up a key ring. Ron Sierra of Bay Florist Company is out of town, but he gave us permission to ransack his shop. So what flowers do you like? Well, she stopped. Hector and I don't have much money, and it would be too expensive for us to get flowers. Expensive? It's free, hun, Robin said. How can it be free? Rain asked. It's not possible. The florist needs to be paid for his stock. Camilla explained. Hector goes to daily sobriety meetings with the florist. Ron is very grateful for all the support he's shown him. Hector only goes to the meetings for the donuts and coffee, Rain said. You know he'll never give up his medicinal marijuana. Doesn't matter, Robin said crisply. He has been with the others in that meeting group for years, cheering them on, crying with them when they fail. He's one of the regulars and they rely on him. Ron Sierra told us to take, and I quote, every freaking flower in the joint, if it's for Hector's wedding. Rain had to turn her head away for a minute. She grabbed a tissue and wiped at her eyes. Somebody's cutting onions in here, she said, sniffing. Yeah, that happens, Robin said. Now tell us your favorite colors so we can go rob the flower joint. Rain smiled through her tears. Thank you. Very much. Okay. She took a deep breath. I like anything old-fashioned, flowers that look like they grew wild in a garden. Nothing too formal. And Hector likes red, so if there could be something red, that would be nice. Got it. Camilla grabbed Robin by the arm. Come on. We've only got a few hours left, and neither of us are any good at this flower arranging stuff. Off to do a little breaking and entering, Robin said cheerfully. See you at 5? What kind of pizza do you like? Huh? Rain asked. She was still trying to get through to Hector on her phone. All this fuss over a wedding, and she wasn't sure there would be a groom yet. The delicate-looking blonde came all the way into the shop. She tapped her umbrella on the floor to shake off the raindrops. It's raining again? Rain asked. Just a bit. But don't worry. We'll get you to your wedding on time. Now pizza. We've got a lot of people to feed at the reception, so what kind do you want? Rain said again. Oh, sorry, the woman said. She held out her hand and Rain took it, getting a firm handshake in return. I'm Lori DiPietro. Zelda Potter is my great-aunt. Rain realized she did look like the young movie star Zelda Potter from all those classic movies. Yeah, a dead ringer, I know, Lori said, obviously recognizing the look on Rain's face. Bane of my existence. So, back to business. Aunt Z said you need something to serve people at the reception. My husband's family owns the pizzeria in town. Rain remembered stepping into the brightly lit restaurant at the end of the wharf, the scents of garlic and tomato wafting through the warm air toward her, drawing her forward toward the best pasta primavera she'd ever eaten. That place is great. So, do you like pizza? Well, I'm a vegan, actually. A vegan? No cheese, then. Yeah, so Hector and everyone else can have pizza. And you'll just chew on a crust of bread at your own wedding? I don't think so. We can do vegan pizza. How about gluten-free? I can have gluten, just not cheese. Is it about health reasons, or is it a moral stance? Rain stood up straight, prepared for a philosophical argument to defend her beliefs. Why? Well, we've got 2 alternatives you can choose. If you can't have cheese for health reasons, we have a nice soy-based cheese substitute. But if you avoid cheese because you're worried about the fate of the cows, we get our mozzarella from the Pajaro Bay dairy, which treats their cows kindly, gives them pastures of clover to graze in, never takes away their calves until they wean naturally, and feeds them only organic feed. Just thought I'd mention it. How about both kinds? Lori continued. Some with cheese and others with the soy cheese, and we can put artichokes on the soy cheese one if you'd like that. Rain nodded. That would be lovely. You'd do that for us? But I don't even know how many people will be there. I don't know very many people in Pajaro Bay. Lori smiled. At least 10 pizzas. Maybe more. We'll see. She went to the door, opened it, and popped open her umbrella. Wait! Lori paused in the doorway. Yes? Why are you doing this? When I was pregnant, Hector made us a mobile out of driftwood. I had never even met him, but he did that because he wanted, and I quote, the little dude or dudette to have something pretty to look at. She smiled. I think you'll find every person in town has a story about Hector doing something for them without asking for a thing in return. Now it's our turn. You picked a good man, Rain. I just figured everyone thought Hector was silly. He is silly, Lori said. And they thought he was weird, Rain said. He is weird, but he's also a really nice man, and everyone in the village knows that. Thank you. Don't mention it. Rain hesitated, but then plunged ahead. Would you like to stay for a cup of tea? The woman cocked her head to the side, in a way Rain had seen in every old Zelda Potter movie. I'd love to, but it's almost noon and I have to get started prepping dough for the pizzas. Can I stop by next week, after you're back from your honeymoon? Oh, we aren't going anywhere for the honeymoon. The road's closed, remember? That's right. Well, you'll have an in-town honeymoon. After all, people come from all over the world to honeymoon in Pajaro Bay. Yes, they do. And I'm looking forward to being home with my Hector. And being married to the man you love. Yes, this is really happening, isn't it? Yep. Gotta go fire up the ovens. See you at 5. And then she was gone. A slightly disheveled-looking man showed up next. Hi, he said. I'm from the senior meals program. Hello, Rain said. What can I do for you? She asked, though she was beginning to get the feeling she didn't need to do much of anything for anyone today. My boss is going to bake you a cake, and she sent me to ask you what flavor you want. He looked around the shop. Something healthy, maybe? Rain laughed. Not too healthy. Hector likes sweets. Yeah, the man said. He really does. You know him? The man nodded, then looked down at his feet. Rain was astonished to see a tear roll down his face. Then the man looked back at her. He saved my life. When? I didn't know this. It's a long story, but I'd do anything for him. That's all I'll say. Then he wiped the tear away. So what kind of cake do you want? My boss said to ask if you like chocolate with strawberry filling. How did she know I'd love that? He shrugged. She's good at that kind of thing. So do you like that? Yes, I'd love that. And she heard you're vegan, so she said to tell you it'll be totally vegan. That sounds wonderful. Okay. He turned to go, then stopped. Be good to Hector, he said gruffly. I will, she said. He nodded briskly, then left. It's the most beautiful dress, one of the women said. Rain stood in the middle of her shop, wearing the borrowed gown. All the women smiled and nodded. It's gorgeous, one said. I wish my dress had been as pretty, another said. Oh, where did you get it, Lori? Someone asked. It was custom made for me by the designer in Chicago. My parents insisted, even though the price was ridiculous. Rain pasted a smile on her face. Thank you so much for loaning it to me. I am really honored. It will need to be taken out a bit here, and in a bit here. Mrs. Serrano's nimble fingers pinned and fussed at the dress, while Rain stood numbly in place. She noticed Mabel Rutherford, the old grump who ran the junk shop, was staring right at her, so she forced herself to smile wider. It's so beautiful, she said. Thank you again. Mabel got up and walked out the door. Mabel, Zelda Potter said, in that voice that brooked no dissent. You have to do something to help, no matter what you think of the ceremony. Mabel kept walking and left the shop. Soon everyone else did too, taking the pinned dress to get tucked and pulled into place. Rain sat there in her little shop, wondering how things had gotten so far from her little dream of standing in a redwood clearing at sunset, with friends around her, and the man she wanted most in the whole world stepping forward to show her how much he loved her. The bell on the door jingled as it opened again, so Rain pasted that fake smile back onto her face. It was Mabel Rutherford, with a box under her arm. "Ma'am, am I intruding?" "Of course not. Please, have a seat." She cleared off a stool next to the glass display counter, and Mabel sat down. She set the box on the counter. "I don't hate Hector," Mabel said. "That's what Zelda said, but it's not true. He's a bit of a flake, but I've always thought he was harmless." Rain resisted the urge to defend Hector from this rude woman. "I had a wedding once," Mabel said. "Not very many people in the village know that. Maybe no one knows it, but I did. It was 1977. He was about to be deployed. We decided to get married at City Hall in San Francisco before he shipped out. It was a last-minute thing, an elopement like you had planned to do. Before all this." Mabel nodded to the box. "Open it." Rain did. "Wow," she whispered. "You're not a designer dress person," Mabel said, "but you're polite, too polite to tell them. They say the style's coming back in, boho chic and all that." Rain lifted the snow-white gown from its tissue paper nest. It was all crocheted, with little flowers scattered across the skirt, and big bell sleeves. Beneath it was a silk slip in the palest shade of pink. "The slip showed through the crochet," Mabel said. "And I wore pink flowers in my hair. It's the most beautiful dress I've ever seen. It'll fit you without altering, I bet. I wasn't always a chubby old woman. But this is precious to you." Mabel nodded. "He died in the war, and my family never knew I'd gotten married. They didn't approve because he was from Wharf Flats. That's the wrong side of the tracks in this little town. I love it there. I have a little tin roof shack down in the flats myself," Rain said. "I know," Mabel said. "You have the shack the Giordano's lived in a long time ago. But back in those days, people from up the hill wouldn't be caught dead even visiting down there in the flats. So my wedding never happened. At least according to anyone in this town. They never knew. So I've always been Mabel Rutherford, my maiden name." "What was his name?" "Ricky Giordano. He put the tin roof on that shack with his father. And now his name's on the big wall in Washington. And no one knows but you. And now you. But it's too much for me to use such a precious dress. We'll be walking in the woods." "No, it isn't too much. It's just right." Then she craned her neck out. "Unless it's not what you dreamed of for your wedding?" "Oh, it is. It's exactly what I always dreamed of." "So it's settled. You can wear it, on one condition." "Oh, I'll take very good care of it, I promise. Tear it into 1,000,000 pieces for all I care. It's been sitting in a box for 40 years. It's time for me to let go of it. It's just an object. Losing it won't change my memories of Ricky." "What's the condition, then?" "You can't tell a soul where you got it." "I promise." The two women smiled at each other across the counter. They all stood at the footpath leading to the fairy ring. The rain poured down. Mabel's dress had fit perfectly, but already, even with a big umbrella held over her head, Rain could see her clothes were getting wet. The crowd shivered in the fading light of early dusk. It was cold and windy, and a far cry from the glittering sunshine she'd once imagined. It was a big crowd. It seemed that everyone in Pajaro Bay had shown up, though probably it wasn't more than 50 or 60 people, most of whom were strangers to Rain. But everything was in place, except for one tiny detail. "Where's Hector?" Rain asked. Finally, another car came up the hill, the raindrops glistening in the air as the car's headlights swept up toward them. The car came to a stop and the driver got out. It was Father Anselm. "Is he with you?" Rain called out. "Where is he?" Then a man got out of the passenger side of the car. Rain's heart rose, then fell, as she saw it wasn't her Hector. Even at that distance she could see it was someone else. A clean-cut man in a formal navy blue suit, crisp white shirt, narrow striped tie clasp, and shiny polished dress shoes. He had short-cropped black hair and was clean-shaven, with wide, dark eyes. If Rain wasn't madly in love with Hector, she would describe this man as rather attractive. Deputy Serrano stepped up to the man. "Are you on the invitation list?" he asked. "Of course I am, Deputy Dude." "Hector?" Rain said. He looked nothing like the loopy surfer she'd fallen in love with. "Wait a minute," Deputy Serrano said. "Something's different about you. Are you sober, Hector?" "Sober as a judge, dude," Hector answered. He stared at Rain. "The Padre said it's important to enter into marriage sober and thoughtful, so I'm totally sober." He took Rain's hand. "I want to marry you, Rain. Will you marry me?" She nodded. "Let's do it then," he said. They held hands and walked together down the footpath to the fairy ring. Rain tried to hold the long dress up out of the mud, but it was going to have a dirty hem by the time they got to the precious clearing, no matter how carefully she walked. "It's just ahead," Windy Madrigal said. "Just like I told you." She walked ahead, leading them to the spot. "Here it is," she shouted, and everyone cheered. They walked more quickly, wanting to get to the ring and get this done, so they could all get out of the downpour. They came to the spot. It must have been a lovely place on a sunny day. The redwoods towered high up, their tops lost in the shadowed sky overhead. And the ring was perfect, round and open, where the big mother tree had long ago died, and the baby redwoods had grown around it in a circle, nourished by the dead tree at the center. The open center sloped down slightly toward the middle, where the roots of the old tree had long since rotted away. On a sunny day at midsummer, the clearing would probably be filled with sweet green grass, and butterflies would flit around, enjoying the peace and serenity of this sacred place. But not today. "Oh no," Windy said. "It wasn't like this when I checked it this morning." The entire ring had flooded. The natural depression had become a perfect little pond. One of the circling redwoods had fallen across the center, ruining the perfection of the ring, and the dead tree's branches stuck up oddly out of the water. The rain beat down on them. Rain listened to the sound of it battering at the umbrellas they all held. It was cold. The smooth water of the temporary pond was broken by the downpour, and it almost seemed to be getting deeper by the minute as they all stood and stared at it. "I'm so sorry, Rain," Windy said. "We'll have to go back. We can still hold the ceremony in our barn. At least it'll be dry." "No," Hector said firmly. "Rain wants to be married in a fairy ring." "Hector," Father Anselm said gently, "it's not going to happen." Hector turned to Deputy Serrano. "Got a pocket knife, Deputy Dude?" "Sure. But why?" Hector held out his hand, and Deputy Serrano put the knife in it. Hector marched out into the growing lake, up to his knees, his hips, almost to his waist in that freezing water, ruining the beautiful suit. "Hector, no," Rain said. "No worries," he said. He got to the center of the ring, where the young tree lay sprawled. One by one he sawed at the smallest branches, cutting and breaking off handfuls of them. Then he gathered them up and waded back out of the water. He was soaking wet. His lovely suit dripped on the forest floor. Rain could see him shivering. But he was grinning ear to ear. He started handing branches to people. They couldn't hold the branches in their umbrellas, so they dropped the umbrellas and held the branches up high. They formed a ring around Rain, around Hector, around Zelda Potter and Father Anselm. When Hector finished handing out the branches, He came to stand next to Rain. "I want you to have your fairy ring," he said, his teeth chattering. "It's perfect," she said. "Well," Zelda Potter said, "I don't know about you, Padre, but I think it's time to get this show on the road." Hector took Rain's hand, and then nothing else mattered. Not the closed roads, or the vows they'd forgotten to write, or the storm soaking them all to the skin. None of it mattered, because they were in a ring of redwood branches, held by people who cared enough about them to trudge out here in the cold and darkness to witness this joining of hearts. And then the Padre and Zelda Potter held hands for a moment too, joining together to bless this union. And then they each spoke, saying words in their own ways to honor and celebrate the sanctity of what Hector and Rain were doing. And then Hector said a few words, in his rambling but sincere way, and Rain found her voice, and said something she could never repeat afterward, because it was as if something else spoke through her, something larger than her, larger than all the tiny people standing in the great forest. And then they all slogged back on the wet, muddy path to the barn, where the flowers had wilted and the pizza was cold, and one of the children dropped her chocolate cake on Mabel's antique dress. And none of it mattered. None of it, because the man standing beside her, holding her hand, was the right man, the one who understood her, and who loved her, and who was her one true match. "I don't believe it," Rain heard someone whisper as they were getting ready to leave. Everyone turned to see Rain actually hugging Mabel Rutherford. Then Mabel noticed them watching. "Don't you people think you look silly, standing there with your mouths open? If you've got nothing better to do, start cleaning these dishes." But there was a ghost of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth, a smile that maybe only Rain saw. Soon everyone was gathering up the plates and cups and piling them into cardboard boxes to take home and wash. And then Hector and Rain went home to her little cottage in Wharf Flats. She had painted the tiny shack all purple inside, as rich and dark as a violet. And it was cozy and warm once Hector had put a log in the cast-iron stove and got the fire going. The storm still raged outside, but they gorged on leftover pizza, and Rain's 2 cats curled up on Hector's lap. One of the cats lifted a paw to touch his hair, as if to say, "Is it really you?" He laughed, and her heart was filled with such a burst of joy that she couldn't help but cry. She came to sit next to him on the beat-up old sofa she'd slip-covered with an old quilt. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Did I make you happy today, Rain?" he asked. "You made me the happiest person in the world today, Hector." Then she sat up and looked at him. "But your ponytail will grow back, won't it?" His laughter echoed up to the ceiling, drowning out the rap of the rain on the old tin roof. This has been a winter wedding in Pajaro Bay. Copyright 2023 by Barbara Cooley. Hi, this is Barb. If you enjoyed my audiobook, you can support the channel by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. If you want to be first to find out when new audiobooks are released, click the notification bell. Also, be sure to sign up for my newsletter at barbaracooley.com so you can hear about all the new releases and subscriber exclusives. Thanks for listening. Have a lovely day.